All right, so hello, welcome to the Skokie Public Library's College Essay Workshop. My name is Chris Bench. I have been a professional essay coach for over a decade now. Flies when you're having fun. I work for a couple of different firms as well as being a private contractor. But I have helped kids work on essays for everything from, local junior colleges, right on up to Harvard, Stanford, Yale, U Chicago, etc. Every step of the process, every kind of essay, I have helped cross those T's and dot those I's, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about, first and foremost, the Common App personal statement, but also supplemental essays. I should mention, if anybody has any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to ask them. You can throw a message right into the chat. I will do my best to watch that while I'm talking. Speaking of which, let me just drag that chat window over into my field of vision. I will do my best to watch that while we're talking, but also you can do the little Zoom hand raise thing. There will also be a period at the end for Q&A if you so desire.
I forgot to
please.
ask Chris. We were gonna check and see how many folks we have who are seniors and how many folks we might have who are other grades.
So if folks could tell me or message Rachel what what your grade is, that's great. Already have a question. What's my opinion on applying to top universities like Harvard? So let's hold off on the Harvard conversation till the very end. Please don't let me forget about it. It's a good question. But it's a little bit outside the ambit of specifically talking about essays, but I'm happy to address that question when we get to the end. So talking on essays, college essays, demystified. This is a confusing topic for many students. I want to try to help you understand what is expected of you for these essays and how best to approach them. So first of all, I want to make a distinction between the two main kinds of essays. On the one hand, there is the Common App personal statement. That is the single 650-word maximum essay that goes out probably to the large majority of colleges that you are applying to as a student. So all of the Common App colleges, which is well over 90% of the colleges in the country. By contrast, the supplemental essays that you're going to have to write are essays that go out not to all of the Common App colleges, not to most of the colleges that you're applying to, but to just one school at a time, or in certain specific circumstances, to a small handful of schools. So if you apply to University of California schools, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC Davis, UC San Diego, etc., they all require, the same set of essays. Also, Texas schools, Texas and California always think they're special. If you apply to Texas A&M, UT Austin, UT Dallas, they'll all get an essay that they share. But you need to approach these essays a little bit differently. In terms of that Common App personal statement, the main essay, typically those essays, they tell a story. They start by presenting some anecdote about your life, some story about your life, usually focused on something that happened to you over the course of an hour or a day, though not necessarily. The goal of those is to make a personal connection with your admissions readers, with the people that are going through your applications. It's the essay equivalent of like a warm handshake, of meeting somebody for coffee, of hanging out for a few minutes for an afternoon or something. These essays, they do not need to be focused on academics. They do not need to be focused on extracurriculars, though oftentimes they are. But they should absolutely focus on some of your personal experiences. Okay, so that again is that Common App personal statement, the main 650-word essay. By contrast, the supplemental essays, and I should note that there's a wide variety of different supplemental essays, but I'm going to just generalize a little bit about them, even though there is dozens and dozens and dozens, probably hundreds, certainly hundreds of different prompts out there. Really are more factual. You're not telling a sort of warm, fuzzy story. You're presenting them with facts and information. They tend to be a little bit less personal. They're more neutral in tone usually. The writing is more straightforward, whereas the Common App personal statement is oftentimes kind of an exercise in creative writing. It's almost like a little short story part of it. Here, you're probably just relating information in a clear, concise manner. They're oftentimes focused on academic or professional goals, and they might also require research. It's a rare Common App personal statement that requires research, because it is those 650-word essays, because they are focused on your story, on your background. You probably already know all the information that you need to convey in there. By contrast, oftentimes the supplemental essays, for reasons that we'll talk about down the road, do require a little bit of research. All right, so let's get personal. Let's start by talking about that Common App personal statement. So before I tell you what you should think about the personal statement and what the personal statement is, I want to talk about what the personal statement is not. And first and foremost, the personal statement is not a thesis paper like you've probably written for English class, been writing probably since middle school. You're not going to get to the end of this thing and have established what the green light at the end of Gatsby's pier symbolizes, or what the causes of the First World War may have been. It's also not just a laundry list of all of your different activities and accomplishments. The Common App has a section for activities and accomplishments. You want to list your activities and accomplishments there. You don't need to do it here because you already did it over there. Significantly, it's also not a biography. This is not your entire life story. These essays, they are 650 words. That is about a page and a quarter. If you try to squeeze your entire life into 650 words, let me say this, if you could squeeze your life into 650 words, it would mean that you're living it wrong. I promise you, you are more than a page and a quarter worth of person. There is so much to who you are and to your life. If you try to get it all in there, you're going to do a terrible job trying to capture any of it. You need to pick one facet of who you are, one particular feature of your personality, your character, and you want to focus on that. Tell just one good story. Don't start from the day you came home from the hospital and try to catch us up on everything since. In fact, you probably don't want to focus on much before high school at all. Now, depending on exactly the story, sometimes it might make sense to start a little bit before, especially if you can point to lots of stuff that's happened in high school as part of that story. But the fact of the matter is, the mental image that your readers are going to have of you is going to be largely based on this essay. This is when they picture you, they're going to picture the you of this essay. And if the you of this essay is 8 years old, well, let me tell you, there are all the good reasons that they don't let 8-year-olds go to college. They are good reasons. 8-year-olds should not be in college. You don't want to tell them a story about you being 8 years old, because then it's going to feel like you're somebody who isn't ready for college. You want to tell them a story about you from high school. You want that mental image to be somebody who's ready to turn around and walk right into that freshman dorm as an enrolled student. Finally, this is not an opportunity to show that you are familiar with thesaurus.com. Too many essays that I read are just full of unnecessary fancy vocabulary. And let me tell you, so I have probably read dozens and dozens and dozens of essays over the years where the word myriad appears. I've never once had a student use the word myriad in conversation with me, right? When you start relying on that fancy vocabulary, first of all, a lot of times you're not going to do it right. You're gonna pick some word you don't really know the meaning of. You're not really clear on the usage. You're going to drop it in there, and it's not actually going to fit, and it's going to stand out as being a sort of speed bump in the essay. In addition to not fitting ideally, it's not going to sound like you. The whole point here is to make a personal connection. To make that personal connection, you want to sound like you. You want to sound like the person that you are. We just got an excellent question. Are there any examples of good personal statement essays we can read? So the easiest place to find examples of really, really excellent, almost too excellent, I'll talk about that in a second. Really, really excellent, one second. Really, really excellent essays is at the Johns Hopkins University Essays That Worked website. If you just Google Essays That Work Johns Hopkins, you'll turn it up right away. Now, significantly, Johns Hopkins is one of the very best colleges on the planet, universities on the planet. And these are the very, very best essays that they got at Johns Hopkins, which is to say, you know, a lot of times handing one of these essays to somebody, it's like handing somebody who just picked up the guitar, like a Jimi Hendrix record or something, and telling them, okay, just do that. You know, you can't necessarily go in and try to recreate these. And if you try to recreate these too closely, I will tell you, just last week, I read an essay by a young woman who basically read a bunch of these and got real inspired by one, and that's great. But then she wrote her essay and she pulled out big old chunks of prose from the essay that had inspired her. And, you know, we looked at it, her mom looked at it, in fact, and was like, hey, my daughter kind of stole this from an essay that's posted on the internet on the Johns Hopkins page. You don't want to do that. Those are essays that it is very likely that admissions officers have read. They're going to see that and they're going to be like, hey, this kid's plagiarizing off these very famous essays. Please make sure that you don't try to copy them too closely. All right, rolling right along. So I've talked about what a statement, a personal statement is not. Now I want to talk about what the Common App personal statement is. What it's supposed to do. The Common App personal statement goes out to more than 900 different colleges around the country. And it introduces you to that other person. It makes that personal connection. You almost want to think of this more as a first date than a job interview. The supplemental interview essays, those are the job interview stuff. That's where you talk about the serious, you know, here are the classes I want to take. Here's what I'm going to major in. This is really about, you know, sitting over a couple cups of coffee and having a meaningful conversation about what you value in life, what your goals and dreams are, who you are as a person. You want to connect with your readers emotionally. This is key. This is a moment to make an emotional connection. Sometimes kids will go into these trying to make some sort of big, grand, logical argument about the world. And that's great, but the world doesn't get to go to college. You get to go to college. We want to make sure that your readers are emotionally invested in you. And to that end, you want to be somebody to be rooted for. The way that admissions officers make their decisions is that they spend all fall reading all these different applications that they get. And then at the end of the season, all the different admissions officers for a given school get together and each of them has a list. Hey, here are the kids that I think that we should admit. And you take all those lists together and there's too many kids. So they kind of fight out, you know, this is the kid that I think really, really needs to get in. You want your admissions officer to be rooting for you. You know, somebody else is like, nah, these kids over here, your admissions reader, they've got to be fighting for you. They've got to be going out there and swinging for you to make sure that you make it in. You also want to show your intellect and ambitions here. This is especially important if you are applying, you know, the student who asked about applying to Harvard and other top institutions. You know, you want to show off, hey, I'm somebody who's striving high. I'm reaching for the stars. I'm trying to, you know, I'm somebody who wants to make a big splash in the world. You also want to show off your intellect a little bit, you know, show that you are smart. Don't do it by just dropping fancy vocabulary, but show it by showing your you know, real engagement with academics and whatever you're looking at in the world. You can show off your intellect as well, talking about making an omelet as you can do it talking about differential equations. You just got to be smart about it. Lastly, show off your writing skills. This is the biggest piece of writing that your readers are going to see of you. And that means that at the very, very least, you want it to be clear and concise, and you want it to communicate effectively. That means, you know, giving this to multiple readers, people that you know are are good writers themselves, who can edit it, who can help you with your prose, who can polish it up, make sure all of your commas are where they need to be, and that you are communicating effectively and clearly throughout. And then for those of you who are stronger writers, who maybe take some creative writing classes, submit to the Lit Mag in your school, who really love English class and read for pleasure, this is kind of your opportunity to flex a little, show off some of those skills that you have, some of those muscles you've developed over the years, the things that you've learned in all of those writing courses. Lastly, the other reason that writing is important here is that you want to be able to get your readers to imagine you. And this is an underrated point. It's something that people don't talk about enough for these essays. You really want to make sure that the story that you tell, that they are picturing you carrying out those actions, that they feel like they can see you in your head. You want to live in their brain for the couple of minutes that it takes them to read this thing. The reason that you want to do this is that whenever somebody imagines you, that's a little spell that you cast over them, right? Think about any crush you've ever had and the power that person had over you by virtue of their living in your brain a little bit too much. That spell, that ability to capture somebody's mind, that's something that we want your essay to do to your readers. So I keep talking about these admissions officers, these mysterious people that are controlling your fate, and without really explaining who the heck they are. So I want to talk about that a little bit. You always want to think about your audience whenever you're writing anything. So the good news is that most of these people are closer to your age than they are to mine. They are typically recent college graduates of the institutions to which you are applying. They usually still live in that community. You are applying to be their neighbor as well as to be a shared member of their institution. They're usually in their early to mid 20s. So they know more or less what it's like to be a young person in America today. They haven't had the exact same experience of you, but like they went through COVID probably while they were in college, the same way that you were going through it in high school. That's not exactly the same. But it's certainly a lot closer than for example, my experience with it was. Typically, they are people who are service and institutionally minded. That is to say that they're people that look after their community, that want to look after their college. They are people that want to try to do good in the world. Being an admissions reader at a college is usually not like the fanciest, highest paying job in the world. A lot of times it's people's first job out of college, and they take it because they really love that school and they want to help that school. They want to work to benefit that school. They're doing it not because it's the biggest paycheck that they could cash at the end of the day. They are very knowledgeable about their schools typically. And they are usually very knowledgeable about you. Typically, the Common App personal statement is the last thing that most admissions officers read. So I want to give you here a rough, so now we know what the goal of the essay is, who's going to be reading it, who you're trying to convince of your quality as a person. I want to now break down a sort of simple 4-part outline for how you can organize your essay. This is by no means the only way to organize one of these essays. There are an infinite number of ways of organizing an essay, but this is a relatively easy way to break it down into chunks, each of which will be sort of manageable. There's 650 words, so if you plan for each of these to be about 150 words each, that's going to plop you right at 600 words, which is right kind of where you want to be. 150 words, not super long, not super hard to write. So the first part of the essay, you want to tell a story. And significantly, you want this story to be tied into a theme. Oftentimes, students will think that the whole point of these essays is to tell a story. You got to come up with the right story. You have to have some story where you climb Mount Everest or you run into a burning building to save a box full of kittens that were about to burn to death in there. And, hey, if you ran into a burning building to save a box full of kittens, if you climb Mount Everest, if you have some crazy story to tell, that's great. A great story goes a long way. Absolutely use that as your jumping off point. But, oftentimes, first of all, people don't have crazy stories to tell. And second of all, oftentimes big, crazy, dramatic stories are not the best way to approach one of these essays. Oftentimes the best stories are something small and intimate and individual. The reason for that is that, even if you did climb Mount Everest, even if you did run into that burning building to save that box full of kittens, how many burning buildings are you walking by on a regular basis? How often are you going out there and how often do you have the chance to climb Mount Everest? These are not things that you do on the regular. Focusing on a smaller story can often actually lead to a better essay because it shows who you are on the regular basis. Maybe the very best essay I ever read was about a young man talking about his houseplants and how he had, killed his first houseplant, he'd overwatered it, but he went and he got another one, and he learned how to take care of it. He learned how to read the signs of overwatering. He learned how to read the signs of underwatering. He learned how much light it needed. And pretty soon he started, acquiring more houseplants, and pretty soon, he had some in every window, and he had a spreadsheet to keep track of what everything needed. He knew this one over here needed partial light, so he put it in that east facing window, got that morning light. Eventually he realized it needed evening light, so he had to take it and put it in a west facing window. He had the spreadsheet to keep track of what each different plant needed. And he just told this story about how he learned to take care of all these houseplants. In the process, we got to see how nurturing he was, how empathetic he was towards freaking houseplants, not even, friends and neighbors and all that jazz, but he felt so deeply about the ficus growing in the corner of his room. We learned so much about him because he focused on that smaller story. Also, significantly, it showed us a big part of his personality. And this is where we get to the second part of this essay, because the story is not everything. You want to be able to tell us what that story means. A story can't go to college. Climbing Mount Everest doesn't go to college. Running into a burning building to save a box full of kittens doesn't go to college. Even taking care of houseplants doesn't go to college either. You are the one who's going to college, the person writing the essay. So the story here should actually reflect back on you. So for the young man and his houseplants, we learned that he's caring, nurturing, that he's detail-oriented, that he's attentive, that he can do research. We learned all these different personal qualities of him. But first and foremost, he focused on the fact that he's a very nurturing person, that he wants to help people around him, help even the plants and animals around him as well. So the second paragraph here, you want to highlight the meaning of that first story. You can think about this a little bit like an English paper. You've probably written English papers where you start out with, you quote a quatrain from Shakespeare, a sonnet from Shakespeare, or maybe a paragraph from Catcher in the Rye or something. You quote that, and then you spend, a paragraph telling us, hey, what does that mean? What is Holden Caulfield talking about when he goes on this rant about how phonies are so terrible? What is Shakespeare talking about when he writes about comparing his love to an autumn day? The second paragraph is you treating that initial opening story the same way you would treat a paragraph from a novel that you're analyzing, or a set of lines from a poem that you're analyzing. In that, you want to tell them, hey, these are my qualities. Look at all these qualities that my story shows that I have. Here's why I value those qualities. Here's why I think that it's important that other people have those qualities. Here's what I've learned from having those qualities. Here are the pleasures and satisfactions I take from having those qualities. I keep saying these qualities. You want the main takeaway here from this essay to be some personal characteristic of yours, some virtue that you embody. So maybe it's that you're hardworking and dedicated. Maybe it's that you're empathetic and caring. Maybe it's that you're creative and deeply original. Whatever it might be, in many ways, that is really the centerpiece of this essay, more than the story that you're telling. Because again, the story is just one thing that happened to you one time. These personal qualities that story communicates, these are the things that you're going to be bringing with you to college. And that's what the readers really care about. And that's why we have our third paragraph. See that seamless transition? In the third paragraph, you want to expand your scope. So we've now gone from telling just that one story. which you want to tell in rich and vivid detail. You want to let us feel like it's actually there. If you're writing about running into a house, a burning house to save a box full of kittens, we should know what it feels like to breathe in that smoky air, to feel it, like knives in your lungs. We should be able to picture those little cats looking up at you so desperately as you grab the box. We should really feel like we're there with vivid detail, almost like it's playing out in our head like a movie. You write it like a short story, write it like a novel, write it like we're watching it happen in real time. By contrast, down here in the third paragraph, the third part, here you want to point to some other parts in your life where you're also exemplifying this characteristic that you want to drive home to your readers. So if you're writing about how you're nurturing, how you care for other people, how you're deeply empathetic, if you're writing that plant essay, that taking care of your houseplants essay, here, just because you keep some houseplants alive, that's not necessarily a reason for you to go to college. So here you're going to show us all the other places in your life that you really care about other people, other creatures. So maybe you volunteer at the local animal shelter on weekends. You're out there scratching those kitties' ears, petting those puppies, making their time in those, as they hang out at the shelter, hoping to be adopted, making that time a little bit easier for them. Maybe you're volunteering at the local food bank, or you're spending time with the elderly. Maybe you just tell a quick story about a time that you walked into math class and somebody that you kind of knew was sitting in the back corner. You were there a couple minutes before class started and they were back there, and you could tell that they were crying. They were having a rough time. And so you walked over and you asked them what was wrong. And they told you about the trouble that they were going through at home. And ever since then, you've been friends. You've watched out for each other. You've had each other's backs. It doesn't necessarily have to be something huge. It just has to be something that ties in with that main theme of the essay, that personal characteristic, that virtue that you want to communicate. Part 4 here is where we go from looking to the past and we start looking to the future. This is the conclusion. And the best conclusions tell us why we care about what we just read. And conveniently for us, we know exactly why we should care about this essay, because it's supposed to get your butts into college. And so tell us, why is this personal characteristic something that's going to be useful for you when you're in college? So the deep care that you have for other people is going to help drive you to succeed academically. You want to go into service work. You want to go into you want to be a policy expert. Help the government make laws that are going to benefit people. Going to help people in need. And you are going to be driven to do this because you care about the people in the world around you. You're going to be showing up for class. You're going to be doing the reading. You're going to be showing up at your professor's office hours because you know that all of that work you're doing is so that you can eventually help benefit other people by getting a good public policy job. You might, again, these don't have to be big, giant goals. It could be something small. Maybe if you want to communicate how much you care, how deeply empathetic you are on a personal basis, you say, hey, I know that the deep empathy that I have for everybody around me is gonna carry on when I get to college. When some kid on my freshman hall a month or two into school is all broken up because their high school significant other dumped them, which I promise you is a thing that you will watch happen. I'm going to be there for them when they don't leave their dorm room for 3 days straight. I'm going to be coming back from the dining hall with a tray of grilled cheese sandwiches and tater tots. I'm going to make sure that they have something to eat, during their depression, during their loss. You want to show how you are going to continue to embody these qualities moving forward. All right, so additional resources. So I have the Johns Hopkins Essays the Work thing here. Also a couple of of collections of essays. You can buy these off Amazon. They're less than $20 each. 50 successful Harvard application essays, 50 successful Stanford application essays. Again, you can get these off Amazon for not a whole heck of a lot of money. All right, so that's the Common App personal statement. That again is that 650 word main essay Now I want to start talking about supplementals. First, I want to drink a little water. Thank you. So supplemental essays typically go out to just one college, as I mentioned earlier, unless you're applying to schools in California and Texas. Significantly, in most cases, those essays should be tailored to that institution. This is especially important for two categories of supplemental essay. Why do you want to go to this college? Why do you want to go to Notre Dame? Why do you want to go to Michigan? Why do you want to go to Wisconsin-Madison? Why do you want to go to Haverford? Whatever. And also, why major essays? Why do you want to be the major that you're signing up for? Those two in particular really need to be specifically directed towards that one school. So how do you go about writing an essay? Why do you want to go to this school essay? You need to do research. And in particular, you need to look out for different classes, different professors, different programs, by which I mean like, excuse me, like study abroad programs or language learning programs or undergraduate research programs, coding bootcamp programs, whatever. But resources that they have, specific resources that you want to sign up for. Additionally, you can talk about a school's, there's a number of things. You can talk about a school's culture. They might have like an honor code, or they might be they might have a religious orientation. So Notre Dame asks you to write about how your academic interests align with their values as a Catholic Holy Cross institution, how you are going to educate not just your mind, but your heart as well. They might have a very specific curriculum. So for example, Hillsdale College or Williams College, Hillsdale has these are sort of odd examples. So let me give you two other examples. So St. John's in Annapolis, for example, is a college where you only read great books. You only read primary texts. You have to learn, everybody learns ancient Greek there just so that they can go and read Pythagoras. Rachel's alma mater, Antioch, has a very specific curriculum wherein, and I'm going to screw this up, but every other semester, I want to say, you travel to a different city to basically do an internship, to work a different job that you then will get course credit for. Some schools have different traditions. So Cornell University asks you to write about some poem that its founder wrote, John Cornell, I believe. West Point, the service academies, the Naval Academy in Annapolis, the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs obviously have very strong traditions. They also have very strong honor codes. Also, you're signing up to join the military, which, you should note that too. Some schools might have specific sorts of essays whose goal it is to help them attract sort of offbeat students. So UChicago has what's known as the uncommon application, where you get crazy essay prompts like, why does 1 + 1 = 3? And what is your favorite color and why? Stanford asks you a bunch of goofy questions, including just writing a hello essay to your prospective roommate. Be aware of these different qualities that make a school unique. One thing that you might see is, you might want to understand the distinction between being a liberal arts college, which is a college with a curriculum that's going to encourage you to take a lot of classes outside of your major because they want you to be very well-rounded, versus a more pre-professional program, sort of a pre-law, pre-engineering, pre-nursing, pre-med kind of thing, where it's really funneling you straight into that major and asking you to focus on that one thing. Understand the curriculum of the institutions to which you're applying, and you're going to be able to tell them why they are a good fit for you. So, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of repeat offenders, common prompts that you're liable to see for a supplemental essay. Why this school? So we're going to get to that more detail in a second. Ditto why major. Expand on an extracurricular. So this builds off of the information that you're going to present in your activities and accomplishments list. They're gonna get like a bullet point there. Here you want to find something where you can go deeper. Yeah, sure. You told them that they were, that you were the treasurer of Key Club, but what that bullet point doesn't communicate is that the last treasurer of Key Club actually had been embezzling and had been taking a secret set of books on the side, and you had to go in and you had to recreate all the finances for the entire previous year because this kid had screwed up so bad, and you had to completely rework their accounting system. If you have some extracurricular where that little bullet point list just doesn't capture the depth of involvement that you had, that's a great place to play it up instead. Essays about your background. So most often when people write about their background or a community that they belong to, students will think about real big picture stuff. So race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, and all those things are great things to write about. But oftentimes, again, focusing on something smaller can actually lead to a better essay. One of the very best essays I ever read about, your identity and your background was a young woman who wrote about being a member of stage crew. And, she was sort of the weird pink-haired girl in the corner. She had trouble making friends. She felt like she was sort of a weirdo and an outcast. And one day she just randomly showed up at stage crew. And she didn't really care about theater. She didn't really care about building sets. She wasn't, terribly really even into the arts. But, this is true when I was a student, and it was true for her. I know it's true for a lot of schools. Stage crew is full of weirdos, always has been. And when she got there, she found her tribe. She found the people that she really cared about. She found people that made her more comfortable to be herself. That essay was like a love song to all the different people, all of her friends from stage crew, and how they helped her be more comfortable with who she was as a person. It was nothing more than an extracurricular, not an extracurricular that tied in with apparently stage crew remains a big bunch of weirdos. In any event, it was a beautiful essay. It was a beautiful essay, in part because she focused on something so small, on something that she wouldn't have focused on otherwise. It was not a huge part of, didn't tie in with her academic aspirations or anything. But it really was central to who she viewed herself as a person, how she viewed herself as a person. And finally, there's lots of overlapping between supplemental essays. So different schools will ask you to write basically the same essay with different word counts oftentimes. What you want to do for those is write the longest version of that essay. But try to make sure that each paragraph can stand alone. So, your first paragraph covers all the important information. If need be, you can trim it down to that length, and you've got a full coherent essay. Then you tack on another paragraph, and it's good for the next longer version of that essay, and so forth. You do also want to make sure that these don't overlap too much. Now, if they bump up against one another a little bit, if you mention something that appears in a different essay or in your activities list, that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you're not telling whole stories or whole paragraphs over and over again, because the real estate in these applications is so precious. You have so little space. You really want to make sure that you're using all that space to communicate something new and different each time. Okay, so here, why do you want to go to School X? I've talked about this a little bit in passing, but we're going to get in a little bit deeper here. So these essays are designed to help admissions officers understand how you are going to fit into the school, what a good fit you are with that school. And this is where the research comes in. So you don't want to talk about stuff that applies to everybody. Don't tell them they have a beautiful campus. Don't tell them that the people are so nice there. Don't tell them their faculty is so brilliant. Nobody is signing up to go to a college because its campus is ugly. I don't know. I really love UIC. and partly because its campus is ugly. But you still wouldn't want to talk about that. You still wouldn't want to talk about that in a college essay. They know what it looks like there. They know that their faculty are brilliant. They know that the kids are nice. Talk about everything you talk about here should actually be a way to communicate a little bit about yourself. So you want to name specific classes. You want to go into what is known as a course catalog. Let me actually throw that in the chat. Course catalog, just in case you haven't heard this term. Course catalog is what it sounds like. It's a listing of all the different courses that have an offer. Just the same way you get a catalog in the mail, you look in all the stuff you can buy. Here you get a catalog of all the different courses you can take. And this should be actually a lot of fun. I mean, you got to do research. This is homework. I get it. But like you get to go through this course catalog and look at all the different stuff that you could learn. You can be excited about learning, find stuff that you're excited to find out about without actually having to do the reading, without having to do the work. This is window shopping courses. Find stuff that you want to take and find stuff, again, that's going to reflect back on you. So if you are an aspiring econ major, don't tell them that you are so excited, you can't believe it. They offer intro to microeconomics. Every college offers intro to microeconomics. Find something that's going to be a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more pointed, something that's going to tell them about you. So my example for this that I'd like to give is that the college I went to, there was a professor in the biology department. In addition to being an excellent teacher, a full-time researcher, she had like 6 kids. She was raising 6 kids. On weekends, she wrote sci-fi novels. I do not know how this woman managed to do all these things, but God bless her. Brilliant, brilliant woman. Joan Slonczewski. Once per year, she would teach a class with the English department called the Biology of Science Fiction. If you want to take a class in the Biology of Science Fiction, if you are an aspiring science fiction writer, if that is your great dream in life, you can't go to Harvard, you can't go to Stanford for that, you can't get it at Duke, UCLA, or U Chicago. You got to go to little old Kenyon College in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. Find something that's going to allow you to tell them something more specific about you. Hey, I grew up, I've wanted to be a science fiction writer since I was a little kid. I'm particularly interested in science fiction that ties in with the fact that we are these biological creatures. And ever since reading Octavia Butler when I was in middle school, this has been a fascination of mine. I can't wait to take Professor Slonczewski's Biology of Science Fiction class. It is the perfect class for my interests. Find those things that you can point to that's going to reveal something about yourself that they aren't going to know otherwise. They already know who their professors are. They already know that they have these different programs and classes on offer. So each one of these should be a way to actually communicate something about yourself. The more connections that you can draw between them and you, the tighter the fit you're going to make. You, of course, all recall that great line from the 1990s hip hop track by Massive Attack. I was looking back to see if you were looking back at me to see me looking back at you. That's what we're going for. We want to see you guys looking at each other, being like, hey, I see what you want. I know I've got it. You see what I've got, and I know you want it. It's a little bit, it's a little bit like flirtation, but with a giant, massive institution. All right, so that is why do you want to go to this college? Now, why do you want to do this major? Okay, so important thing to know about why major essays is that there are 2 flavors of why major essay, because majors mean 2 things. Major can refer to like a body of ideas. And if that were the case, if that's what they were asking about, hey, if a major was nothing but a bunch of ideas, you could major in something by just going to Wikipedia and taking a bunch of books out from the library. If Harvard, Stanford, Yale, they put all of their syllabuses online. A lot of times lectures are available for online for free also. If you wanted to, you could basically take those Harvard classes and have all of that information. What it doesn't give you is the piece of paper with the fancy Latin writing on it. And that is because major, in addition to referring to a body of knowledge, more often refers to a specific program of study at a specific institution. And most of the time when you're writing this why major, that's the question that you're answering. Why do I want to take this specific program of study at this specific institution? Now, sometimes a college will ask you, how did you get interested in this topic? In that case, hey, they just want to know about your background, your interest. write that essay. That's great. And you know what's super great is that that essay can work for any Y major essay that is asking how you got interested in that topic. But if they are asking, why do you want to study this here? Even if they just say, hey, why this major? You want to make sure that this is now, again, specifically tailored to this college. You want to treat this basically like a Y college essay, but a Y college essay that is focused entirely on the major, So again, you want to be specific, find classes, find professors. Also, like, get a little bit nerdy. You can talk about things that you've done, big projects that you've done, big academic accomplishments that you've had thus far. Show them why you're already invested in this topic. Show them how you're going to build off of the accomplishments that you already have. In my AP biology class, I spent an entire semester doing fruit fly experiments, breeding fruit flies to exhibit different traits. Your new Schulman genetics laboratory with cutting edge CRISPR gene editing technology. I can't wait to get in there and build off of my fruit fly lab, take that knowledge that I already have and use your resources to take it to the next level. Draw connections between yourself and the institution. Show how their resources are going to help take the road that you've already traveled and extend it further in front of you. All right. So I was asked to actually skip past. Oh, we have a question. Not why major essays are interchangeable. Why? So I'm very sorry. Not all Y major. Okay. So not all. So somebody asks, why are Y major essays not interchangeable? Y major essays, maybe I apologize. I wasn't clear. Some Y major essays are interchangeable. If a Y major essay is asking you to just talk about how you got interested in a topic, then it is interchangeable. But if when they say Y major, they ask, why do you want to study that major here with us specifically? Or they just ask Y major at all. If they just ask Y major straight up, assume they're asking, why do you want to study this here? In that case, it's basically a why this college essay that's focused on the major. So you want to give them those specific information about why you want to study it there. Because again, a major isn't just about the body of information. It isn't just about, the facts and the theories. It's about the courses, it's about the faculty, it's about the facilities, the laboratories, whatever. It's about why you want to study that information here at this college with this group of people. And unless they specifically say, how did you get interested in the major, assume that they're asking, why do you want to study it here? And so do the research so that you can tell them the specific reasons why their college is better for studying that than anywhere else. So I was, we're coming at this relatively late in the season. Oftentimes I will run through the different prompts. I'm going to skip that for the time being. Because my understanding is that many of you at least have already identified prompts that you want to work on in your English classes. So at this point, I want to open it up for questions. We already had a lot of great questions. I really appreciate that. Appreciate a lot of stage crew weirdos. I was a stage crew weirdo once upon a time. That was not my essay, I promise. My hair was not pink. But who else has questions? The pink really doesn't work with my complexion. Lena.
Yeah, so I have a question about kind of the Common App like general essay. So one of the issues I'm having is that like I do creative writing, on my own time, but the issue with that is I'm usually writing about other people's stories or narratives that are not real or just not my own. And so how do I like kind of change that mindset, because I've been trying to do like all the prompt and self-reflection and all that like mind throw up on paper, but it's not working, and I just can't flip that switch in my brain.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first of all, self-knowledge is hard. The ancient Greek prophets, they wrote "Know thyself" over their tomb because that was the hardest thing that you could possibly figure out. That said, a couple of ways to do this is friends and family, people who know you well. They're going to be able to help you think about like, they might have a great story that they're like, I should write about that. Or, they might be able to point to what they see as your personal qualities that you want to highlight. That's a good way, using somebody else's vantage on you is a good way to sort of at least get your feet on the ground, on firm ground. So, okay, that makes sense. I can head in that direction. Think of yourself as a character a little bit is one thing to do. Like, what would I look like if I were a fictional character? It's a little bit weird to do that, but if you are representing yourself on the page, what are the physical qualities that I would want to highlight to play up who I am? What are the ticks and quirks of my behavior that I might want to pull up? Think about if you're trying to identify a story, any story that you think back on and you're like, hey, at the beginning of this, I was sort of a child. And at the end of it, I was, if not fully an adult, then more adult than I started out. Any story that fits that bill probably is at least a good contender for a potential college essay. Because the stories that you want to tell, you want to show growth, you want to show development, you want to show maturation over the course of them. So anything that you came out the other side being like, hey, I feel adult in a way that I was not before it. That can be a good approach. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, that definitely is. I think I just have to ask my friends and maybe my mom about it.
Let the people who know you well, who see you from the outside, give you some direction, and then you can hopefully coast off of that. And I apologize, I forgot about the Harvard question. What is the value of applying for Harvard? Is it worth it? And that is a complicated question. It really depends. I can't tell anybody, without knowing you a whole lot better, whether or not it makes sense for you to apply to Harvard. What I can tell you is that if the only reason that you want to apply to Harvard is that it's very famous and is Harvard, it's probably not a good reason to go to Harvard. Harvard's undergraduate education is actually, it's good, don't get me wrong, but like there are a lot of better teaching schools out there than Harvard, in part because they're very much a research school. Harvard is a fantastic place to be a graduate student, to be working on a PhD. Harvard is a fantastic place to be a faculty member, in part because you oftentimes don't have to spend a lot of time teaching undergraduates. That's not to say that there isn't good education that goes on at Harvard. But if all that you want is the fancy name on the piece of paper on your wall, hey, there's some value in that. It'll certainly open doors for you. But what you really want is a really good education, there are a bajillion places to get it that aren't necessarily so hard to get into. I'm not entirely sure that answered the question. Was that addressing what you were asking? I would not say that it's overrated exactly. Harvard gets to be Harvard because a lot of tremendously good research goes on there, like top shelf in the world, and that is what its reputation, properly understood, comes from. As an undergraduate place, it's a great place to network with lots of very, very rich people, and that can get you a lot of legs up in life. And I'm not going to tell you that is not worthwhile, because hey, that's having fancy friends will help you in life. but it is not the only reason to go to college. Chikum Nazu. I apologize. I'm sure I butchered your name.
Okay. It's
You had a question earlier.
Yeah, so I was wondering, typically teachers or counselors say to get 2 core subject teachers for teacher recommendations. Would it be okay if you had a teacher in your intended major that was writing you a letter rec, and then another teacher that was a teacher of an elective subject? Would that be okay?
I mean, it would. So I'm not a college counselor. Let me say that. I'm a writing person. I'm an excellent writer. My real strength lies in that department. I will say that having a core teacher and then an elective teacher is better than going to, your neighbor or something. Absolutely. If possible, I think the direction that you're getting, you should try to find core teachers, probably is a strong argument, unless that elective teacher is an elective in something that you are really passionate about and hope to pursue. So like I had letters of recommendation from creative writing teachers, but I was a creative writing major and wanted to go into writing as a profession, and lo and behold, have done some version of that. In that case, because that was a central focus of my application, it made a lot of sense. That said, if you don't have an elective that's lined up that is so central to your personal goals, then then if possible, if you can find two core teachers to write you letters of recommendation, then you go with who you can find. But Rachel
let me add to that. So my advice is, if you have a really good relationship with someone who's an elective teacher, ask them for a letter of recommendation. And also, if you can, get 2 letters of recommendation from people in your core subject. So one of those letters may not be as good as the other, right? One of them might be from someone who doesn't know you as well. Maybe you only took one class with them. Maybe it's very like perfunctory. They're not a very good writer, and it's basically like they were good. That's okay. It kind of will help check that box. And then you can have as many supplemental letters as you want, I believe. And speaking for myself, like I love to write letters of recommendation, and I know that the letters that come from me are always supplemental, right? Because I might have been an employer, I might have been like a supervisor volunteering for a long time. Like I might know the student from the time they were in 6th grade or whatever, but I'm not that person who can speak to their like schoolwork in their core subject. So bottom line is, if you have a good relationship with a teacher that you'd rather ask for one of your recommendations than one of your core teachers, just ask them all.
Thank you. That was really helpful. I also had like another, I'm not sure if it's going to be a quick question, but I also wanted to know if when writing essays, is it worthwhile to make the personal statement a metaphor, or can that get confusing and muddled up?
That's a great question. So it's possible to make that work really well. It's hard to pull off, and you want to make sure that you're doing so in a way that's not going to take up a whole lot of the essay, right? So I'm helping a student right now. He's a fisherman, right? He loves to fish, and his whole thing is that he's interested in, being able to look at the surface of something and know about its depths. And so this is true of looking at a pond that he wants to fish in, but it's also true of his interest in medical technology and of his love of Puerto Rican history, because it connects him with his heritage. And so he has this sort of central metaphor of looking at a surface and going, in order to get at its depths in a couple of different places. It's a thing that he can sort of turn to real quick and invoke and then move along from. Now, if by contrast, the point that you want to make is that, if you spend like hundreds and hundreds of words laying out that extended metaphor, or if your extended metaphor is that like, hey, let me talk about why I'm so random. If your metaphor is that like, hey, I'm a box of chocolates, you never know what you're gonna get, or hey, I'm a bag of Chex Mix. There's different, you pull out a different handful every time, as a way to not have to focus on one topic. That's actually very problematic, and I see that a lot, where the extended metaphor is kind of just an excuse to not have a thematic focus. Have a thematic focus, because if you don't have some central theme, some central quality that you're focusing on, some central characteristic of yourself that you want to highlight, the essay is going to feel scattered. Even if you have that metaphor, the metaphor won't be enough to hold it tight together. We have another question. When choosing what to write in your college essay, would it be beneficial to have it relate to your intended major if there's a good story and theme to write from it, of course? So it can be, yes. So the challenge there is that you're going to have to write these why major essays. So if you're looking at those why major essays and you say to yourself, okay, I have a good way to talk about why I want to, do this major, without repeating stuff that you're talking about in your Common App personal statement. Again, you can mention the same things, briefly, but you're not going to end up telling the same story. You're making similar arguments. You're not going to end up repeating yourself from essay to essay. Then absolutely. But if you're saying, hey, here's what I want to write about in my main essay, and that means that I now have no idea what the heck I'm going to write about in my why major essay, well, then you kind of have a problem. And then you got to either figure out some other way to talk about why you want to be that major. And that might be just focusing entirely on the course of study. That might mean just focusing real hard on that school and what resources it has on offer. If you can't figure out a way to separate those two topics, then you might need to change the topic of your Common App personal statement. More questions? Y'all are great on the questions, by the way. Really appreciate it. Cannot tell you the number of times I've done these and everybody just sits there quietly afterwards. And it's like, well, those are some very nice gray rectangles. I hope. Hope everybody had a good time. Lena, what's up?
Yeah, so I have one more question about like the diversity essay, like usually the supplemental, because an issue I ran into, and I talked to a few teachers about this too, like I guess it's specific for like Asian Americans, and a lot of like college institutions have like the issue of like playing into the like model minority myth or whatever. And so a lot of like, forums online or just teachers in general say if you're Asian American to stray away from like being to talk about too much of your culture, because there are like similarities and experiences, because the immigration of a lot of Asian Americans revolve around the 40s, 60s. There is going to be similarities. And so how do I approach it? Because like I managed to figure out a way how to still implement my culture in my like Common App essay, but then like in supplementals, when they directly ask you about that, like how am I, like it's a large part of my life, but I don't know how to address it in a way that still stands out while still being true to myself.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question, and the model minority thing is certainly a thing that comes up, and it is certainly the case that there are whole recurring tropes of Asian American kids writing college essays that end up looking kind of like one another because they have similar experiences. So what I would say is that if you can point to deeper places of engagement with your culture, so places where you know more, where you engage more deeply than with everybody writes about food, right? And I love food, and food is a great way to engage with your culture. but it can be kind of a cliche to touch on that because it is such a prominent part of every person that comes from a general region. Has a similar culinary background, for example. If you can point to something more specific, so like, you can tell I'm as pasty as the day is long over here. But if I were writing about my ethnic background, I would write about the fact that my family came over from well, they came from a bunch of places, but specifically a couple of them came over from England and went into the coal mines in Pennsylvania. And some of them worked as coal miners, but some of them were also detectives that infiltrated the coal miners when they started trying to form unions and busted down those unions and basically sold out their friends and family members. Not my favorite part of my family's story, but it's something that's much more specific than just talking about like, hey, I showed up with this food at lunch that my classmates thought smelled weird, and they, I felt very embarrassed, and I had to deal with the fact that I had to try to communicate to them that no, this is a totally normal thing to eat in huge swaths of the planet Earth. That's a meaningful experience and not something that anybody should have to go through. But it's something that's, because it's so common, it tells us less about you in particular. Find those like smaller, more pointed family stories, right? Like not everybody's family members were like Pinkerton detectives ratting out their own family members in order to make a buck and sell out some unionizing efforts. And then I could talk about like, okay, so now I've got this thing in my family history that I'm not very proud of. What do I do with that? Trying to understand the relation to it. Find more specific stories, find stuff that's more pointed about you, that isn't just about the broad nation that you come from, that's about your specific family, that's about your specific region, your specific town that your family comes from. And it's going to make it more specific about you. In general, specificity is always a asset for these essays. The more specific you can be about whatever you're writing about, whether in these essays or really anything, generally speaking, the better your writing is going to be. Try to find those things that are going to be specific to you and not to the next kid over, not to the next Asian American kid over either. And it's gonna make your essay, about Lena and not about student X, Y, and Z.
All right, that helps. Thank you so much.
Happy to oblige. Anybody else?
In your opinion, what's the hardest essay to write?
I don't have an answer for that. That one right there, that would be a really hard prompt for me to write. The U Chicago prompts are kooky, right? Why does 1 + 1 = 3? Is hard, but is an essay that when kids come to me with those essays, I'm always excited because it's a new challenge for me, but also I do this professionally. It's a thing I like to do. It's a thing I find interesting. So hard for me is kind of like also like exciting and cool and fun. And so then less hard. But I guess it actually, you know what, I take it back. I do know what the hardest one to write is. The hardest one to write is the Purdue. You get why Purdue and why major. They ask you basically nothing other than why Purdue and why major. Those are like basically the entirety of the prompts, and you get 100 words each. And I don't know what the heck you're supposed to say that's of meaning and value in 100 words. You rattle off a couple of, hey, I want to take this class, I want to work with this professor. I'm already at 97 words and I'm out. Anything where the word counts real short. That Cornell essay that I mentioned, we were supposed to talk about the poem, it's a bad poem. Much respect for John Cornell. He founded a great college. But it's a bad poem. It's not a very interesting poem. It doesn't do much for me, at least. I'm never particularly thrilled by that essay. Cornell's a great college. I want to reiterate, fantastic school. Bad essay. Anybody else got a question? You guys have had great questions. I'm not just saying that to say that. Good luck with that one, Lena. It is a very bad poem.
I actually have a question.
Isaac, I'm sorry I didn't catch that.
I actually have a question.
Yeah.
So I started actually writing my essay, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good. I'm having trouble ending it. Like, how is there any tips that you give me how to end it so we can like bring it all together again and like, you know, leave them like, okay, that was good.
Yeah, great question. Endings are hard. So again, for the conclusion, this is not like the very ending, but the conclusion, almost always gesturing towards college, telling them how what you've just told them relates to college, how it shows that you're going to be a good college student is a really reliable way to sort of approach the conclusion in general. As for like that, Isaac, it sounds like it's that like last sentence that you kind of want to, you want it to sing a little bit. You want it to, it's like the piano chord at the end that you want to resonate in the room a little bit. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just nervous that like they're gonna be like, okay, it's good, and then the ending is just like blah, and then I can be like, oh, this was like a waste of time.
Well, I mean, it won't be a waste of time. But there's a couple of things you can do there. For one, call back to the opening. So like whatever your opening sentence is, your opening, the opening kind of image or the topic that you address right off the bat, returning to that opening, good way to give it a sense of unity and cohesion. Other things that you can do in that last sentence is, look to a metaphor. It's a good place. You don't want your writing to be too metaphor heavy, but this is a good time. Excuse me. Shouldn't have gone to Wendy's for dinner. This is a good time to drop in a little bit more sort of like fancy writing stuff, a little bit of imagery, a little bit of metaphor. Get a little bit of poetry going in there. Other things to look out for. You can, I mean, this is a moment to sort of like be a little bit more emotional, a little bit more frank, a little bit cheesy, like if you can't be cheeseball in the concluding sentence of your college essay, then there are very few places where you can be. Don't be afraid to break out the Hallmark card sentiment a little bit here. Because, hey, us old people, we look at you, we got to believe that you're in a moment of hopefulness at this point, because if you aren't, then we're really screwed. So it makes us feel better about our own futures, us olds. So lay a little cheese on top of that particular concluding sentence. Ending with an image is always good. If there's something that's going to stick in the reader's mind, oftentimes imagery does that better than just words. There's no single answer for how to do this, but as much as possible, you are right. You do want that last sentence to be something that resonates with a little bit of the reader. Again, I think the single most reliable way is that gesture back to the opening, though.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Good question. Other questions?
Okay. Seeing nobody else raise their hands, and you still can, or unmute themselves, I think we'll call it at 8:22. So I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Oh, and I just want to throw in one last thing. put my email in the chat. If anybody does have any questions down the road, please feel free to reach out. You know, happy to drop a little wisdom down the road as well.